At the Beak clan's back garden, Seongchan made his way to a tree and he placed his right hand on the tree bark. He planted this tree a long time ago, but back then it was smaller than Yigang. Seeing the tree now made him remember how much time has passed since his glory days. Yigang approached Seongchan as he reminisced about the old days, and he asked why Seongchan didn't show himself in the court of elders. Seongchan started sweating nervously. To shift the conversation, he pointed out the leaves on the tree, and he asked if they weren't pretty. He says even back in his time these trees were beloved by the poets. The willow trees are said to be imbued with the power to chase away ghosts, and shamans hit those who are possessed with a willow branch. Yigang grabbed one of the willow tree's branches as he expressed this to Seongchan. He plucked the branch, and afterwards he struck Seongchan in the back, to show him an example of how the shamans exorcise those possessed by ghosts. Seongchan's eyes went blank and he screamed out in pain. Yigang stared at the branch that had gone limp, surprised that it really has the power to hurt a ghost. Seongchan grabbed his back in pain. He angrily turned to Yigang, yelling that the branch had no power, and Yigang was only able to hit him because he used his previous training to put his willpower into the branch. Yigang smiled. He apologized to Seongchan, and he asked if getting hit with the branch hurt. Seongchan told Yigang that he was fine, but he furiously asked him to throw the branch away this instant. Yigang's face lit up as he smiled, and while telling Seongchan that he will throw the branch away, he stored it in his garments. Seongchan angrily watched Yigang as he stored the branch in his garments. He was about to call him a slur, but they were interrupted by Jinti, who called out to Yigang. Jinti quickly made his way over, and he placed his hand on Yigang's shoulders, and he asked if he had to wait long. Yigang turned his head and he looked up at his uncle. He was a little bit shaken up. Jinti apologized to Yigang for making him wait. He says those boomers had many questions they wanted him to answer. He took out a well-crafted box, and he showed it to Yigang, saying it was a gift. He told Yigang that the box contains very rare herbs, and he expressed that you can't buy these herbs easily, even if you have all the money in the world. Yigang quickly opened the box to check, and inside this well-crafted box was 3 root-like herbs that had bloomed flowers. Yigang stared at the box, not really sure what to make of it. Seongchan excitedly expressed to Yigang that these herbs can only be found across the northeastern Black Rivers. Yigang was still doubtful. He asked Seongchan if the herbs were really that rare. Seongchan said of course. He says to Yigang that each one is full of yang energy, and he will guide him later so he could take that yang energy for himself. Since the divine immortal blade was speaking so highly of the herbs, Yigang figured they must be rare. He turned to his uncle with sparkling eyes, expressing how grateful he is for the herbs. Jinti laughed. He told Yigang that he wants him to be healthy, since he has to become the young leader. Seongchan scoffed at Jinti, saying he is transparent. However, Yigang sympathized with him. He explained to Seongchan that even if he took the role of young leader, he won't live past 20. And his father also has a lung disease, so he won't be able to keep his position for long. And if the two of them are unfit, the next in line wouldn't be Hajun, but one of the elders. But if he holds the young leader position long enough, Jinti can become an elder himself, and will be the first candidate to be the patriarch. Jinti is pushing for Yigang to become the young leader because it's the only way for him to become the head of the clan. With a slight chuckle, Yigang tried to pull away, and he asked his uncle how he could take on such an important role with his condition. Jinti pulled Yigang in again, and says he shouldn't say things like that. He told Yigang not to worry about his condition, since he will get him all kinds of good medicines. Yigang interrupted Jinti, asking if he called him to the garden just to tell him about all the good medicines he planned on getting him. Jinti stared at Yigang with an enthusiastic smile. He expressed to Yigang that he is too impatient, and says he heard something from the architect that he wanted to tell him. Apparently the guy that bought the blueprint asked the architect if the blueprint was the real copy. In other words, they had already investigated the layout of the place beforehand, and they bought the blueprint to double check. Yigang thought deeply about what Jinti just told him. If his assailants investigated beforehand, it means they could be looking for something. Yigang's deduction skills impressed Jinti, and he praised him, saying he was clever. Yigang's assailants were in fact looking for something, and Jinti asked Yigang if he remembered anything about the secret place he mentioned when he was saved. Yigang recalled the place where he found Seongchan's sword, and where Seongchan possessed his body to kill the assassins. He told Jinti that he remembers that place well. Jinti started questioned if Yigang found out about the meteor child. He asked Yigang if he saw anything suspicious looking in the secret place. Sweat dropped down Yigang's cheek. He looked up at his uncle and he asked what he could be referring to. Jinti pointed at the jewelry on Yigang's hands, and says he was referring to an old jewelry or some kind of accessory like Yigang had on his hand. Multiple sweats flowed down Yigang's cheek. He told Jinti that he doesn't recall seeing anything like that down there, which was obviously a lie. Jinti stared at Yigang with a smile that says he had him figured out. However, he acted clueless about Yigang's lie and says that's all he had to tell Yigang. Yigang felt relieved as he thought Jinti had caught him. Jinti suddenly remembered something else. He told Yigang that there was someone who wanted to meet him. and he called for this person. Yiging stared at the person as she approached them. After getting close, Ryu put her hands together and she introduced herself to Yiging. Afterwards, she asked him if he could give her Soa's belongings since she is her sister. Most sects expand their forces through their own schools of thought. Examples of these types of sect are the demon cult's cult, the beggar sect's beggars, and the Shaolin's child monks. However, the 7 great clans are different, as they are families. Most of the members of the 7 great clans possess very strong martial arts, but there are 100 members at most who are this talented. This is why they do not have much influence in the Jianghu. That's also why they employ people from outside and take them in if they prove themselves to be loyal and strong. But that still isn't enough to suffice sometimes, and so they bring in orphans, and Soa and So Ryu are examples of that. Soa and So Ryu had been together even before they entered the clan. However, they were separated. Soa was raised as a servant, and So Ryu was raised as an escort warrior. So Ryu was lucky enough to be taught by Jinti, and she became a member of the Red Dragon Brigade, and she accomplished this in her late teens. Even with So Ryu's impressive accomplishments, So was still worried about her when she left on escort missions, and she cared for her when she returned from those missions. The two weren't related by blood, and even though they couldn't meet often after becoming a part of the clan, they were still family. Yiging and Ryu left the garden and they headed back to his residence so he could give her Soa's stuff. The two walked together in awkward silence. Xiangshan asked Yiging to say something. He says even he was feeling awkward. However, Yiging didn't know what to say or how to start up a conversation with his dead servant's sister. Xiangshan gave him the idea of talking about martial arts. Yiging thought about this idea for a moment. Afterwards, he turned to Ryu and he asked her about the type of martial arts Jinti taught her. Ryu was surprised that Yiging was the first one to break their awkward silence. She told him that Jinti taught her about martial arts focused on protection and assassinations, martial arts like the shadow moonwalk. She decided to learn these martial arts because she wanted to tour Jianghu with her sister one day. Her reply made things more awkward, and Yiging asked Xiangshan what he should say now. However, even with his vast knowledge and long lifetime, Xiangshan didn't know what to say either. Suddenly Jin, who was with Hajun, noticed Yiging and they called out to him. Yiging looked at Jin as his savior, and with a big smile on his face he addressed Jin asking for what he wanted. Yiging's smile creeped Jin out and he took a step back, and he asked Yiging why he was smiling at him like that. Moving away from Yiging's creepy smile, Jin asked Yiging to scold Hajun for not wanting to play with him. Hajun got angry and the two started arguing. Hajun says he has no reason to play when Jin will lose in any game they play, and Jin told Hajun to stop acting arrogant when he lost to him in a duel. Yiging watched the two as they argued. This made him happy because it seemed the two have gotten closer. He let out a sigh of relief and he told Hajun and Jin that he will oversee a duel for them tomorrow if they stop fighting with each other right now. Jin quickly agreed and he told Yiging that he is going to go to the Ruby training hall to practice right now. Hajun also quickly said he would go train as well. And as the two ran off, Ryu expressed to Yiging that he seemed to be having fun. Yiging faced her, and he asked if it seemed that way to her. Suddenly Yiging heard a voice calling out to him from behind. The voice sent a shiver down his spine, because he knew exactly who this voice belonged to. Behind him, Mua came running with tears running down her face, and with Leon close behind trying to catch her. She heard that Yiging was going all the way to Qingrim, and she was concerned for his sick body. She grabbed his hand, and she said she would come with him. Yiging's eyes went blank. The thought of Mua coming along and taking care of him sent shivers down his spine. He quickly told her that she couldn't come since her father would get very worried. Mua begged him to take her. She promised to be on her best behavior. Leon, who had been chasing after Mua, was finally able to catch up, and she grabbed Mua from behind. She told Yiging to run while she had Mua pinned down. Mua gave some resistance, but after realizing she couldn't free herself, she asked Leon to let her go. Yiging thanked Leon for holding down Mua. He turned to Ryu, and he told her that they should get going. Leon begged her to hurry as she wasn't sure how much longer she could hold Mua back. Mua noticed Ryu next to Yiging, and as they ran off she called out asking him to explain why he was walking with another girl. After getting some distance away, Yiging and Ryu stopped running. Ryu had been quiet the entire time, so to lighten up the mood Yiging let out a deep breath and says today has been rather chaotic. Ryu finally spoke, saying Yiging seems to be very loved. Yiging smiled, and he said he wouldn't call it love. He turned to Ryu and he reminded her of his position. Yiging noticed that Ryu didn't seem to be in a cheerful mood like he was. He noted that she has been acting a bit weird ever since earlier. Later they arrived at Yiging's residence, and Yiging asked her to wait outside while he brought Soa's stuff. Inside the residence, Xiangshan told Yiging that he has a bad feeling about Ryu. He says when Yiging asked about martial arts, she didn't say much, and back in the day that was his money move. And he also didn't like the fact that Ryu looked ominous whenever she looked at Yiging. However, Yigang knew why Ryu was looking at him like that. While making his way over to grab Soa's stuff, he told Seongchan that Ryu's only family member died while protecting him, a useless son of the clan. Yigang was certain that Ryu didn't like him. Seongchan asked Yigang if he was just going to continue to let her hate him. He picked up Soa's stuff, and he told Seongchan that Ryu can hate him if she wanted. He thought it wouldn't matter much since he will be leaving for Cheongrim. However, Seongchan told him his way of thinking is wrong. Yigang turned his head questioning Seongchan. Seongchan explained to Yigang that he shouldn't mock the intentions of the person who died for his sake. Yigang angrily turned around, and he asked Seongchan how he was mocking Soha's intention. In Seongchan's opinion, there is nothing more pathetic than sacrificing yourself for a useless person, and he asked Yigang if he was going to tell Ryu that her sister died for someone who wasn't worth saving. He approached Yigang and he placed his hand on his shoulder. He told Yigang that he shouldn't be lying about not being affected by others hating him, just so he could feel better about what's paining him. A short while later, Yigang exited his residence. He handed Soa's stuff over to Ryu, saying these were the things she used most often. Ryu thanked Yigang, but before she could leave, Yigang stopped her and he asked her if she hated him. This question shocked Ryu, so Yigang repeated his question. He asked this question because it must seem to her that he was living joyfully after her sister died for his sake. Ryu told Yigang that he was correct. Yigang then asked her if she wanted him to live in repentance for the rest of his life. Ryu hesitated to answer, and after giving it some thought she said no. Yigang approached her and he grabbed her by the shoulders. He told her that he plans to live a good life. After all, he promised Soa that he will not give up until he recovered from his condition. He also promised that he would live to the age of 100, so after curing himself, he plans on killing the person who hired the assassins that killed Soa himself. He will live a good life no matter what, since Soa saved him because she thought his life was worth saving. Yigang's words inspired Ryu. And while reaching into her garments for a letter, Ryu told Yigang that it's true she resented him. However, she didn't think he wasn't worth saving. Her sister always talked about him, so she brought Yigang part of a message she sent her, and she handed the letter to Yigang. Ryu recalled reading the contents of the letter that Soa sent her, which were always stories about Yigang. She heard so much good stuff about Yigang through the letters that she was starting to get jealous. Recalling the contents of the letters deeply saddened her, and she told Yigang that those letters made it impossible for her to think his life wasn't worth saving. Yigang stared at the unopened letter. He realized that the reason Soa learned to read and write from him was so she could send her sister letters. They both missed her greatly, and while opening the letter he noticed that there was something inside. A few days later, Noong had finished preparing Yigang's carriage. He called Yigang outside, so they could get going since they had a long way before reaching Cheongrim. Yigang came outside and he entered the carriage. As they rode off, Muah, Jin, and Hajun waved and screamed out their goodbyes. Inside the carriage, Yigang took out the letter Ryu gave him yesterday, and he started reading it. The letter read, "The next day the young master told me that he has no recollection of it." The letter was Soa writing to Ryu about Yigang's sleepwalking, which she found strange because she never thought Yigang would be type that suffers from sleepwalking. Yigang read the letter multiple times since it mentioned him sleepwalking, and a few days ago Seongchan was surprised after reading the letter with Yigang for the first time. Sleepwalking is common in children, but the letter mentioned that Yigang even cooked rice cake and talked to other people, and Seongchan questioned if that's even possible. Yigang himself wasn't sure, but he told Seongchan that one time he woke up from the shock when he was washing his face in his sleep. Seongchan shivered and he said to Yigang that it must be scary. Yigang shifted the conversation since something else in the letter was bothering him. Soa had written that Yigang brought her a ring. Afterwards he told her he was going to take a nap. Soa questioned the sleeping Yigang about the ring, but all he said was that he didn't need it, so she sent it to her sister, along with the letter that discussed Yigang's sleeping habits. Yigang took the ring out of the envelope and he observed it. However, he has no recollection of ever having this junk of a ring. Seongchan recognized the ring, and he got embarrassed. He told Yigang that the ring was trending back in his day, since it had topaz in it. Yigang was shocked and he asked Seongchan if the ring belonged to him. Seongchan said yes, and he told Yigang that he wore the ring to enhance his drip. Yigang thought about this some more, and he realized that the assassins who attacked him back then were wearing rings similar to this one, so he questioned why Ryu gave him the ring instead of Jinti. Seongchan told Yigang that Ryu is probably suspicious of Jinti. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then hit the like button.